at the level of the act, the nirvana principle achieved by Francis of Assisi, the movement becomes mostly like this movement I have described to you. I will bring you, as I said, Lacan's response to civilization as discontents was a decent one, but not the best. It was the 4 discourses. My response to that text, it was a breath. It was the ergon and the monad, because I connected St. Francis of Assisi with the proper dimension of love, and St. Teresa with their divine orgasm, with the divine drive. It's not a formulation that these formulas that you can see in civilization, but it is something there in that book that is more important than anything, and it is the dimension of love. We still have a lot to learn from saints, because they are more miraculous than psychoanalysts. The psychoanalytic miracle in most schools is a pessimistic one, because it puts you as a viewer to look the logic and understand what is behind it. They speak about the removing, Lacan in seminars 17 or 18 speaks about from myth to the structure. Actually, it's a structuring of the myth that you will create to be enacted, to which you will dedicate your nobody. Okay, we're dealing with the structure in the sessions, but the construction is a myth of the act. It's not actually a myth, but it's closer to something that it's closer to the legend. It's something to be written, not to be read. The signifier is an S1 only because of the change of signifiers and the change noting. The absolute identification with the act is the analyst as an object causing desire. That object, harassing. What is in English harassing? Angela or Penny, if somebody knows. Scraps.
It sounds like a kind of carving.
Carving, okay, yes. It's not writing, but it's carving. So I spoke about the unary carving, but to remove, and I spoke here about the act of the analyst. Okay. The absolute identification with the act is the analyst as an object causing desire. It's an object of desire because he has access to the breath. That object, harassing, carving, like the unary trait, not to introduce okay, it's I have the video here, but let me see if I can forward it to you. Mira just send it to me. Mira, can you send it in the chat of the Zoom? Guys, were you listening to me? Mira, send the same video that you said in the chat here, and everybody can see what I was meaning with how this new Mobius strip functions. Thank you, Spiro, for your card, a hand material, blah, blah, blah. People can read it there. So, the absolute identification with the act is the analyst as an object of desire, not causing desire, an object of desire. You are the breath. You are identified with your own breath. That's the das Ding. That's the nirvana principle. Freud didn't speak a lot about the nirvana principle, and he cited it in the level of psychosis because, as Richard Klein told me, he didn't have access to the object breath in the way that used it, not even as an object A. That object scraps harassing like the unary trait, not to introduce, but to create ex nihilo in the plurality and pandodynamia, omnipotence, of the signifiers. This ex nihilo is not the part not taken by the discourse of the other, which Lacan mentioned in his Eccrits, that becomes desire later, which some refer to as the source of the drive, but the kinesis introducing the knot, which dissolves the connection, which makes signifiers what they are. The Sinthome does not offer that. It gives you freedom with the same other and a knot. It's on the side of coping, if I may create pen. No, this is what Penny said is very important. You are on the side of coping and not creation. Okay? You can create within the same fantasy, but that's not your own creation. The unary trait also appears in the way the analysand chooses the analyst. Okay? I wrote a few notes here. Neurosis, there is polysemia or Sinthome. Psychosis is the Sinthome. The act, it can be in all structure, provided they find the no body. Perversion, he's calling you to be the object by which he enjoys consciously, and you have to pay the price. In psychosis, there is a call to complete their body to the analyst. Neurosis, and call to complete the fantasy. Miller, Jacques-Alain Miller, in his Genius, of course, and we will try to decompose him in the same way he tried to decompose Lacan and Freud, in the same way Lacan decomposed Freud. Miller cannot say much about topology. Soler's even worse. And they can even say less about the resurrected body of Christ because they fail to go beyond their bodies. That's their blind spots. They cannot go beyond their bodies, and that's why they are very little involved in the topology. Okay? The other side of psychoanalysis, Lacan says that in the other side of psychoanalysis, you cannot, he says that you cannot escape the other. And yet, he speaks about Saint Teresa. I'm trying to show you a contradiction in Lacan. He mentioned a jouissance not of the other, but it's precisely a jouissance escaping the other of language. So there is a contradiction in what he's saying. Okay? This is not the la langue. This is not of the la langue, but of the language with you that I write, the pronoitu logo, of the breath. What I will call today the divine, that's for Harulla, the divine tongue. In the first, I think it's in the first page of Joyce and the Sinthome, you would be surprised how many times he speaks about la langue, language, discourse, and tongue. And I was wondering why he brings the tongue. Tongue, it's a word. Of course, you know that he was training in Jesuit school. The word tongue is what is used in the religious text. The tongue is something connected with God. Even in the Tower of Babel, they were speaking different tongues, he says, but in other ways, there was a tongue. The organ of the tongue takes there a different signification. It's something that is beyond the organ, but it's a way of communicating with the divine drive. The divine tongue is a divine drive. Okay. That's the language. Then breath is that which communicates with the God who cannot act. You are the actor of God. You are the savior of God, as Kazantzakis would say. This is not to make psychoanalysis metaphysical or religious, as Jung did, at least on a certain extent, but to refer, I want to refer you to both Freud and Lacan, that they use two saints, I use, two sacred people, Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Teresa, in order to show the exception to their own rules. Why they did not find other examples? One cannot withdraw with one's body from the big other. The big other is not reduced as long as you have a body. This is from Miller in Lacanian biology. He says one cannot withdraw with one's body from the big other. And my addition to that is the big other is not reduced. You cannot withdraw from him as long as you have a body. Saint Teresa and Saint Francis, they were separated from their body, the body provided by the fantasy. So this is my response to the blind spot of Miller. In anxiety, bear with me, I'm finishing. In anxiety, the object is ektoto, a fallen object. This means it has fallen from its value. And how is that happening? It is happening by having the signifier by which it is covered. And I say covered because the drive surpasses that signifier as it was invisible. So to go and get the signifier representing the phallus, it has an elliptical move around the object A. What is important in the drive, they say, I will say something different today. It's not to avoid the object A, because that is veiled, but the aim of the drive is to go towards the phallus. Okay? It goes, here's the object A, so, but it goes elliptical like this, because there is a phallus. Okay? If you go to the object A, okay, if you go and you can able to remove it and have this emptiness where it leads to the different knot that I spoke other times, this threshold to the infinite, you encounter your object of the object of the das Ding, which is, it's not a forbidden object, it is quite the opposite. It is a breath, and breath that not the initial act of breathing, but a breath that it was constructed according to this. You have to go through the signification process and atone to each other. So the das Ding is that which is forbidden, so you get the phallus. The drive aims at the phallus, is not avoiding the object A, it aims at the phallus, at what represents the phallus. So it's invisible because that threshold is invisible because there is a signifier there that you have to avoid. It is in this way that the drive constantly operates and moves, that it seeks to represent the subject according to the ideas formed by the fantasy. The phallus is needed for that, one signifier representing the subject for another signifier. Thus, if the object is lost, then it means that the valuable signifier veiling it has either made the object A an appearing on the level of the organism or in the force of persecution. What I say with this is you have still ideal. The ideal is what you hunt, then if a threshold appears, the object A, that which it's actually what the object does think, the object, your true object of desire will appear as persecutory, as it happens in the nightmare, because you haven't been able to be removed from the fantasy and create something anew, a body that is new. And this to happen tells us that the faith of the subject, it is still devoted to the Oedipal ideas through which he or she were receiving love, in quotes, love. Or it reveals the door, on the other hand, the threshold, provided one wills to go beyond their body. Okay? The father of castration is a father of jouissance, and I put him in opposition to the father of desire, the at least one who desire. Lacan is speaking about the father of castration and the father of jouissance. I think it's seminar 17 or 18, I'm not sure. But if you want me to find it out, I can find my notes somewhere. The first interventions in the knowledge of inscriptions of luck, the ladder, okay? I will speak about the myth and structure, and myth and act. One copes, and it requires from myth to structure that you keep repeating the truth with your life so that the myth exists. This is a coping. Okay, it's a truth based on coping and keeping the fantasy alive. Okay, what to say more? There's a few more ideas I have. So, coping requires you that you keep repeating the truth, the latus, the lanthanusa that I say, because Lacan referred to the latus to the university and the scientific discourse, mostly the capitalist discourse. So that you keep repeating the truth with your life so that the myth exists. The second, ask you, the parousia, what I'm saying, the beyond the body. The second asks you to give it a body. Singular by singular moments, because they create step by step a myth to be enacted. It's not a myth that you are viewers. You are writing this myth. And you are not just writing it, you are writing it with your own body. With this no body, you are writing it. That's why you are becoming a cause of desire. I will speak about the father who names, and I'm referring there to the Joyce and the Sinthome. Of course, I will do a very thorough analysis of this. The father who names, it is not a stage to reach if we are orienting psychoanalysis to the act, but the transition. As Penny said once, he is lost after the naming. He names and he lost. He's naming that which, not the subject, but he's naming that which to be dropped. And this is where the phallus appears, by the way, in psychosis. He's naming that to be dropped, the body. So this is the father who names before his death, before his honorable funeral. It shows a prerequisite of the act which is beyond naming. Naming names the noun. You are a noun. You are a name. You need to become a verb, a nameless verb. A verb is that which does not have a name. In the Sinthome, there is interplay of the words language and tongue, as I said earlier. The tongue is divine. It is the pnoei του λόγου, the language with you, and the support of the divine drive, which Harula Pilavagi is devoting a chapter in her new book that will be published probably in a few months. I'm looking forward to read what she has to say. The object A, this is from Lacan also, this is a quote from Lacan, removes, listen to this, listen to what, this is very important to the concepts of the breath. The object A removes the asphyxiation of jouissance and of the unary trait. I don't have to say anything about it. I kept this at this point because it exactly explains what I was saying earlier. It removes the asphyxiation of the jouissance and of the unary trait. Pay attention to the word he used, asphyxiation. So when you remove the asphyxiation, you've got the breath. From the names to the names. Let me see. No, I don't have much. Give me 5 minutes and we're done. From the names to the names. From one God to the name. To discover the truth implies that if we want to discover the truth, as Lacan says, that's a question for you. Please write it down. The discovery of the truth. What does this imply on the graph of desire? The graph of desire is a practical thing. It tells you what is happening in the sessions. So if the aim is intentionality, but our aim is to make cuts, domes in the intentionality, if we are aiming at the discovery of truth, what does it explain? What does it imply in the way we practice on the graph of desire and our understanding of the graph of desire? I would say one of the things that the graph should explain how we go from myth to the structure, as Lacan said in Seminar 17. And that as well implies something else, I say. That from being dressed in the mythical cloak, one now become a spectator of structures, a masturbator. We are just viewers. We are not actors. Actors on the sense of the act. And we just are able to see the functions and the pessimists because we function on seeing what is behind. Okay? If to discover the truth that Lacan says, what does it imply on the graph of desire? What does it imply on the structure? And what does it imply on the formation of analysts? It implies an analyst who is a viewer, not one who operates as an act in life and has a desire for everything instead of a desire to utilize as a tool in the sessions. An orientation on the treatment away from adding to act an act to the truth, as I say, creates the jouissance of the peeping Tom. It's an expression, we don't have lepsia. because we're just there looking, we're outsiders. How can you be present? Not by entering the analysis discourse, but if you have a body present in the sessions, of course, intervene to the discourse of the analysand, but that body, that being, that identification with the act has its own act, identified with its own act in life. It exudes a different sort of desire. We don't even have to try to be different and create this absolute difference, because nobody can imitate our act. Our act is inspiring. We are the objects of desire. So an orientation of the treatment away from adding an act to the truth creates the suicides of the peeping Tom. How can you think, that's a question for you, of the graph and the procedure towards anastasis, the resurrection, if the act is what directs psychoanalysis and not just the discovery of the truth? In another seminar, I said, what if the purpose of science was not the discovery of the truth, but the facilitization of the act, the facilitating the act? The ergon, one of my introductions to psychoanalysis, kills the phantoms of the father who names. The ergon, if you reach a stage, you become the act, identify with the act and the breath, kills the phantasm of the father who names. The tomb is necessary for the resurrection, not of the father, but of the subject. The father, who is a desire and being, who is dedicated and identified with their act, does not need a father, because the function of orientation is given by the act. So the dead father has a proper place. He doesn't function as a rule, as a law, as a totem, or as a taboo. We recognize its honorable grave, but desire, in my opinion, is the desire and the identification with the act is the real father. That's the real father. You are the real father. What is a real father? One who inspires. Not one who's becoming the object causing desire within a specific fantasy for the sake of it at the end, to understand that the fantasy is just a fantasy and the analysis is an object A. This sort of bullshit pessimism, I don't want it in the way I practice. In this moment, I would tell you that Heraclitus, my favorite philosopher, he went and he died on a pile of dung, of shit, to show that the human body, I tell that in the seminar, was useless. Okay? We don't want to reach that pessimism, because the human body, I would use something from the Orthodox tradition, it's the house of your desire. You are not just housing it, your desire is a commander. You are commanding your body. You are not naming your body. You don't need a name, because the verb is nameless. Okay? And 2 minutes and we're finished. Let's try to put our shadow back to the body. The shadow is a breath. The father who names is not the subject, even though you can see that when the phallus is established in schizophrenia, they are able to name themselves and the other differently. That's some of the Sinthome, you can see it in psychosis. But there is something beyond that. The father who names is not writing, but he's on the side of reading. He names in order to read the subject. Reading is not the same as writing. Writing is infinite. You don't write to be read. You write to continue writing. That's the choice. The price of the analyst is to choose his own death. It's psychoanalysis. I think I don't remember the Spanish, or what I would use the or in English, muerte. I saw that in Cuba, was socialism or death. And I would say it's the act or death. The naming from the father who names creates, and thank you, Angela, who brought that in my attention. The naming creates something else to be read. The father who names creates something else to be read. That's why even if he names and writes, he stops and he creates something else to be read. It's an operation within the same fantasy. He does not create a new word. He cannot create a cosmogony. Writing, the writing probably is a signature. Not even the letter is there. You cannot read the letter, because if you can read the letter, it means that it is trapping the signifier. The letter, it's a signature, it's movement. Lacan says that the planes exist. Οι παιδιάδες, the planes that he saw from above, they get their value because of the running water. I will say something last, but I will mention it in detail. There was this Eve dream that Lacan mentioned. He says that he was perversive because he was getting enjoyment from the. It's a case that from a different sort of analysis. He says that it was perversion. I would totally disagree with him. I think it's a case of schizophrenia. I will speak about, my next seminar will be about that dream. And with this, I will stop my seminar and accept 10 to 15 minutes maximum. 10 minutes question, because we already passed the hour. Sorry, it was a lot of material and I feel I have to say it. So let's start with the questions. Marina, you can take over. And
Petro,
yeah,
just before you start questions, you wanted to share that video. I cannot upload it on the Zoom, but what you can do, you can take your phone and put it on your camera so everyone can see it.
Okay. Let me try to find this fucking. Which one? The first? Yeah, I found. Okay. Something like that, guys. Look at how the Moebius here, kind of Moebius moves. You see, it makes sort of movements, but the inside comes outside. Did you understand what I'm talking about? The particles are in the same place. How the fuck is?
That's an important visualization to help us to imagine, because so much of what happens now in the education and the formation of human beings is on flat surfaces.
Yes.
And the thing is, we're dealing with manifolds. Even the Borromean knot, it's a closer representation to see it as a manifold rather than, and what you showed there was precisely that kind of spatial. It's a better spatial representation, because obviously how things are really structured is beyond our current scope of imagination, but it's workable provided we leave it open. In other words, we don't flatten, we don't insist that it remain flat. Things begin to be simple and bring our imaginative capabilities to life if we include the I don't know. If we write in the limits of current knowledge, and this relates to everything we were talking about in terms of the body, and the body, what's key really is about the identity of the radical identity of the being of desire that each one is, and how I would read your reference to being an object A, the object of desire. It's actually, the object is desire itself.
The object of desire is not the object. The object of desire is not the incest, but
no, it's not the object of desire, but the being of desire itself. What is inspired?
yes.
Is when somebody is in the presence of a desiring being.
The parousia.
Yes, that's right. It's desire itself. It's not a it's not a little thing. It's not a thing that you can point to. It's a presence that you resonate with, and this is where I find it interesting and useful to think in terms of locality and non-locality in physics. So I think scientists, both mainstream and the ones who are pushing for transformations, are grappling with these matters of the oneness. Even Lacan, I don't remember in which seminar, but it's one, I think, il y a de l'un. There is something of the one. And the one is always taken up as a one like this, in other words, a little thing, but it's not that. It's the way in which things are not separate. But the point is how to extract oneself and from the other, which is not a subtraction from the other. It's an extraction of oneself to be able to read the signal from the noise. And each one of us has to do that. Otherwise, we're drowning in the other and the signifiers of the other. And the other thing that you mentioned about the drive aiming towards the phallus is characteristically the desire of the other. And the subject precisely has to extract themselves, disentangle themselves from the desire of the other, the conditions of the desire of the other, and assume their own being as desire.
Yeah.
And with that, it implies the creation of a new body, which is synchronic, not the body of the history, which is encoded in all the entanglements. So precisely one has to sever oneself from one's ancestral bonds.
Yes.
Otherwise, one is defined by the discourse of the other. And we're usually oscillating between those moments of extraction and re-entanglement, but that's the know-how of the subject. You said a lot there, and I'm sure, we're going to be learning from this, for many years to come. So that's my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Marina, can you allow me to share? Because Mira sent me a good video of that before I receive any comments or questions. Allow me to share the screen. Is it possible? No, it's fine.
Pedro Virginia put it in the chat and I've downloaded it. So we do have.
Okay, that's.
Thank you, Virginia.
Mira, you can put it on the chat also, the one you find. Okay, let's go to a different question. Who wants to ask something else? Harula?
Hello, Petro.
Hello.
Thank you for the. I would like to ask something about the myth you said. You spoke about from myth to structure. You said something about coping and keeping the fantasy alive.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask, why do we need this myth?
The myth is the Oedipal myth because we were, if it wasn't for that myth, we will not be able to connect, as Eric Laurent said, as boys and girls. Okay, it's a myth that interprets the world, but it gives us a place in the world. And in psychoanalysis, according to different other schools, you go from myth to structure. In the way I teach psychoanalysis, you go from myth to the creation. You are removed from myth, you go through a structure, but you create a myth to be enacted. Okay, because if you are an act, you are going. Miriana, put your option, please. Mute. So it's a myth to be enacted. Desire is a myth to be enacted.
Well, in this case, we continue calling it then a myth.
I like to call it a legend, and it's I like to connect it with the Greek word themi, in the ancient Greek sense that they devoted their life, and that was their kleronomia, their inheritance to the world and the culture, what their act would leave behind, how they will be spoken of. Okay, it wasn't about a name, but how they created the name. That's what was spoken. So who you are, it wasn't a name, but you received a name because of your act. So the whole act became a name.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you.
Angele? Non comparo.
Yeah.
Question?
Not a question, but the last thing you referred to about the fame, the way they acquired this fame was through the act. It reminds me a lot of this function of the real father, not the father who names that you distinguished from it, but there is a possibility of acquiring a name, although the name is irrelevant.
Yes, it's the verb who is important there. In ancient Greece, it wasn't the name, but the way you achieved your name. The verbs were important. If you are going to the imaginary, like the United States, constant, and the way they do these therapies and stuff, they constantly try to bring forth different identifications, and this is where the name is important, but not the verb. The subject who is constantly named. In order to go to the verb and go beyond the Sinthome and go beyond the body to go to the no body, the subject has to become a verb. And that's the most difficult part in one's analysis. The most difficult part, because the symptoms, any symptoms that they have, they escalate and they become so hard, so powerful on him or her, that they have to make a choice, either to stay within the structure, symptomatize, or in the way I can name and fix it and make it more gentle, or to be removed from that. That's the moment that one is called to proceed to language with you from language, which means speech and parole. From the speaking being to the ergon, the being of the act. Thank you, Angela. Any other question, comment?
Petro, one more thing. I would like to understand a bit more what you've said before about the divine tag.
Tongue, glossa.
No.
Yes.
Is it the term you give to la langue?
No. La langue is something different. The divine tongue it's something connected with the divine drive, and it's the language with you that I write. It's a pnoidologo. The divine tongue is what was experienced. Freud didn't name that, Lacan didn't name that. They gave a different name. Is what was experienced by Saint Francis of Assisi as an exception of love for the pessimistic Freud, and what was experienced as a feminine jouissance by Lacan. By feminine jouissance, he meant a jouissance that is beyond the signifier and thus beyond the body. So the divine tongue is something that connects the verb, not the subject, the verb with the word.
Is it when we speak about what we love?
No, when we are performers of what we love.
Then what's the difference between divine drive and divine tag?
You are the divine drive.
And the tag?
The divine tongue is the way you connect with the world.
I think the divine tongue is Pedro. Sorry, but I think the divine tongue, as Pedro has sketched it today. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pedro. Yeah. But it's the inspiration, the desire that the subject has to interpret and connect it with the language, the common local language of the community, in order to create something recognizable and relatable in the world. So when Pedro was talking about the God that cannot act, God has to act through each of us, because we have to translate. We are the conduit between the divine and the incarnate.
Yes.
And precisely our formation ongoing is to more and more be able to incarnate with the body that we authorize our body to transform, to be able to be in that place, to express and to act according to our desire, and to give shape to our world through that.
And shape to our bodies.
To our bodies, through our body, because our body inscribes all the values and beliefs. So the analytic process, in a way, the psychoanalytic process meets the divine process halfway. The psychoanalytic process is the mortal reaching to refine, reconsider, to edit the inscribed values and assumptions in the body of knowledge, both within its own person and in its community, and even more broadly. So you have to make some preparation with your assumptions and beliefs, otherwise you cannot reach further than your own beliefs allow you. And we suffer because our beliefs oppose our desire. They oppose our inspirations. They oppose what gives us joy, right? And we accept the terms of the other's articulation. So when I say to the other, so the subject goes to the analyst probably initially asking for a name. It's like, name my being, tell me how to think of myself, because I don't know what's happening, right? And really in the end, not only by the end of analysis does the subject have to simply say, like the burning bush, I am that I am. In other words, I cannot name and make myself a small object, because I'm precisely the capacity for naming anyway, the smaller objects. In other words, it's the refusal. So the identification goes to something completely of another order than the object that was my mother's daughter or my father's daughter or whatever it is. And it's interesting when Pedro was talking about the name, although this is a symptomatic case, it made me think of my grandfather's brother, who his name, he was named, and he still is. And you can imagine simply, when I tell you what his name was, you know immediately the kind of symptom he was called. Would be known even now in the village, or Nicoliso Fasarias. He's dead now, but I'm sure he's dead now. He must be. But that was, people named him because, and it was brought to my attention when his father, yes, my father's cousin, we were talking about, the family and the village and such, and my uncle, effectively, he said to me, my father, he was a gentleman, this man, he's still alive, his son. He said, my father, he went after my mother with an axe. And this father who went after his mother with an axe was Nicoliso Fasarias, right? Okay, that's a name. In a way, the name is always given by others who observe. But he was acting out, but essentially you are a verb, you're doing something, and the others will make a legend of you. You don't say, I am of Fasarias, because if you can say, I am of Fasarias, you're already moving away from that in some way, right? So it's somehow really, refined transformations in relation to language and how one is inscribed, and moving from being defined within the terms of the other to a synchronic being defined by the real. And then it's for others to read that.
The father who names can exist in from the movement from schizophrenia to paranoia when you treat schizophrenia. But so this is where we can see the father who names more powerfully. Okay, if it's in some sort of a neurosis, if the father who names it's the subject naming itself, but it is within the fantasy, because the naming is something to be read. It's something to be read. It is not on the side of writing, but it's something, even if you write it, it's on the side of the verb does not have a name. The verb does not have a name, and because it doesn't have a name, it's one of the reasons that it doesn't have a body. So there are other ways to discover and function with our bodies, but I will speak in a different seminar about it. Okay, thank you, Penny, for your comment. Is there anybody else? Anybody who wants to make a comment or question before we close it?
Hello, Petro. I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
If in the act, the analyst is a particle of the olon, that means the olon, we're talking about, it's a reference to God, to universe, blah, blah, blah. But can it create a new life? Not
Well,
life, it's a metaphorical.
Well, okay, you use the religious terms here. The analysis is operating in his own monad or her own monad, and there is a dedication in his or her own act. That's why he's at least one who desires. And yes, if there is an analysand who is with a counter with this at least one who desire, the fantasy or what I described earlier is desire, then we have a creation ex nihilo of a new body, of a new way of approaching the world, because this person, the analysand, woman or man, have a counter that exception. The exception is, this is a proper Uber father for me, the at least one who desires. And this is what I expect from Mosai, the at least one who desires. Not desire the absolute difference, but desire by becoming an act, not only in the sessions, but in their own lives. Okay, and that it's enough to create space and possibilities for somebody else to create a new life. It's a nice sentence that you put there. That's my response to you.
Thank you, Petro.
Okay, I think we should go. Enjoy your afternoons, after evening, and I will see you soon with a different sort of seminar.